Justin, and thanks to the team at TMG for asking me along today. Unfortunately, I don't quite have the same lovely radio voice as Kate, so you're stuck with my Kiwi accent for the next 20 odd minutes. But totally unintentionally, there is some similarities and consistencies between what she was talking about and what I want to chat to you about today as well. Really what I'm here to talk about is the concept of adopting a consumer mindset in B2B markets. And I'm acutely aware that I think, the last hurdle between you all and your lunch. So I'll try and do my best. No, I'm not. Okay, I'll do my best to keep to 20 odd minutes anyhow. Now, I've titled this B2ME, the case for a consumer mindset in B2B marketing. B2ME is a phrase you may have heard previously. You may have seen it elsewhere. I think the first sort of use I could find of it was going back about 10 or 15 years, and it was really used in relation to how the proliferation of data could lead to deeply personalized and targeted messaging. That's not at all my use of it. I've entirely bastardized its use purely to be talking about how we've become too obsessed and too focused on the second B in B2B. And Kate talked about this a little bit at the end, actually, where we're talking to businesses when actually businesses don't make decisions. People within businesses make decisions. And we need to be talking to those people, not to the business itself. And that's the premise of what I want to touch on today. We're in, I think, a particularly exciting time at the moment where I think B2B has been starved really of good empirical evidence and data around what actually makes effective B2B marketing. And over the last few years in particular, some of that started to come to the fore and is coming to the fore more and more as we move forwards. And there's a few things I want to pull out today to talk you through and highlight some of the points we'll make. Really quickly before I go into it, a little bit about how I got here myself. So for the last sort of 12 or 15 years, I've been working in research and insights. Focusing, I started my career in the world of public health, trying to understand how people make decisions around their lifestyle and how initiatives and communications can influence and change that. Worked on a few different programs around what's now known as the Breakfast in Schools initiative, and a few others around childhood obesity. Now I jumped over to the slightly murkier world of commercial insights and research about 10 or 12 years ago. And have been spending the better part of that time trying to understand how marketers can influence and change people's behaviour as well. Now, over the last 5 years in particular, I've spent a lot of time working with B2B brands and a lot of technology brands around how they can understand their audience, their brands, their markets, their competitor set, and create a marketing strategy that can utilise that and achieve the growth that they're looking for. The agency that I'm part of, Perceptive, has a couple of technology products itself that we use. So we've also experienced some of the same challenges that most of you would have as well. Now, firstly, I do want to point out that when I'm talking about a consumer mindset in B2B marketing, I'm primarily talking about the strategies we're using, not the tactics we're adopting. I'm not here to tell you to run away and spend your whole marketing budget on a 30-second TVC at 5:59 before the news. I'm talking about the overarching strategy and how our marketing affects our audience and what we're trying to achieve. The tactics that we use in B2B are entirely different. If you were the CMO of a toothpaste company, then buying that TV slot before the news makes total sense because everyone with a toothbrush is your audience. For many of us here, our audiences are niches within niches, and the tactics we need to use to reach them are appropriate for that. The strategy, however, is much more similar to the consumer world than we may otherwise think. And this is what I'm adopting. And what I'm going to be talking about is really that top bar. B2B is very similar to B2C in terms of the strategies that we use to impact our audience and to drive long-term growth. A little bit about what I see as the status quo, the current situation within B2B marketing. And from working with a number of the brands that I showed before, and even just observing B2B marketing, as a B2B, decision maker myself, there is this obsession with product over brand. We spend a lot of our time talking about our products, espousing the benefits of them, what they can do for you, talking about how much innovation and efficiency and all these other great words our product can deliver. And we ignore the fact that our brand is our most important asset. And this has been now shown through a number of different studies. And if you go back, back to 2009, I think Jeff Bezos famously said, ads are the price you pay for having an unremarkable product or service. Basically saying the product will do your job for you if it's good enough. Now, he since recanted that statement and is, as you can see here, I'm not sure if you can see those numbers, but over the course of the next 10 years, multiplied his advertising investment exponentially, and is now in 2019 was the largest advertiser in the USA, and is consistently in the top 5 even since then. He was challenged at a board meeting about this statement and said, yes, I have changed my mind, I was wrong. This is a snippet from a blog I took from HubSpot. Many of you might know HubSpot as a platform, multi-billion-dollar business, specializes in helping B2B marketers and through their marketing and CRM systems. And they've talked about this, if I just highlight the first few points up here, the difference between B2B and B2C. And this is the mindset that I see a lot of. B2B, for example, the goal of B2B marketing, customers are focused on ROI, efficiency and expertise. B2C, customers are seeking deals and entertainment. Marketing needs to be more fun. Purchase motivation. Customers are driven by logic and financial incentive in the B2B world. Customers are driven by emotion in the B2C world. Drivers, they want to be educated in B2B context. Customers appreciate education, but don't always need it to make a purchase. So very much saying there's a distinct difference between B2B and B2C decision making. And we are saturated because of that with rational, logical messages about our brands. We're trying to educate our consumers. We're trying to tell them what we do, how it can benefit them. In the B2C world, we're trying to use emotion. We understand that humans are inherently irrational creatures, and we need to try and harness that irrationality to help our brands grow. Now, this is a bit of data that was pulled out of about 11 years worth of advertising award submissions. And they broke out the B2B award submissions from the B2C award submissions and looked at the different creative strategies used by those two groups. And you can see here that B2B is the blue bar. Sorry for those at the back who might not be able to quite make that out, but B2B is the blue bar, B2C submissions is the orange bar. And if we look at the orange bar index is effectively the measure we're up against here. In the world of B2B, oh, excuse me, can I go back there? In the world of B2B, we're over-indexing hugely on educational, logical, rational messaging. We're trying to tell our audience all about us and our product. And we're underrepresented hugely on all these other creative strategies, things like emotion, music, brand characters, user-generated content, humor, all these things that we know can create a connection between our audience and our brands. We don't use storytelling. We don't use all these other really important features of the marketing toolkit, the marketing playbook. We're just simply going out there trying to educate and inform. So what's wrong with that? Many of you will be saying, well, you know, we are talking to business owners, decision makers, whoever our audience is, and they sit down and they assess and they compare information and they make decisions accordingly. Well, the fundamental issue with that is that we only got one brain. And when our business decision makers show up in the office in the morning, that brain doesn't switch into some different decision-making mode. The same emotion that they used in the morning to buy whatever it is they've just bought as a consumer is driving those decisions in the business context as well. The brain doesn't have a B2B mindset and a B2C mindset. They only have one decision-making brain. This concept of a rational, logical B2B decision maker And an emotive, irrational B2C decision maker doesn't sit and doesn't fit when you look at the way the brain works and the way that ads and marketing can impact decisions. The other thing that we're missing a lot, I feel, in the B2B world is that we're ignoring the role that emotional and brand priming can play in growing our brands over time. Now, this is a piece of information or a chart that I've taken from the long and short of it, a marketing book by Les Burnett and Peter Field, which highlights the role that short-term activation messaging, the yellow line on this chart, plays in terms of growing our sales and our short-term effects, whatever our key business outcome is, whether it be trialists, subscribers, direct sales, leads, however we define that. In the short term, it's really effective. We pump money into those bottom of funnel activation channels, we get a return back. But what happens when we turn that money off is that disappears. We've got to sustain that spend over time to keep that going. Emotional brand priming, the purple line on this, builds over time by building a connection between our brand and the purchase occasion or purchase reason in the mind of the consumer. Now, what that does is effectively supercharge our short-term sales, because when people move into market, they have that connection in their mind. They've connected our brand with the reason why they're purchasing that particular product or service, and that short-term activation, this yellow line, benefits from that, becomes more effective because of that. Brand priming makes our audience more receptive to our short-term sales and generation activity. The way I think about this is a bit like gardening. The yellow line is the harvesting of the crop at the moment. The purple line is the watering and fertilizing of next season's crop. The more we do that now, the better the harvest will be next summer. And this purple line is what I think we're ignoring too much. Our obsession with the short term is ignoring the impact that we can play in the long term. Our investment in brand amplifies our investment in activation. The other problem with a very short-term activation mindset, trying to educate, trying to inform, trying to generate a response from our audience in the immediate term, is that majority of our buyers are not in market at the moment. Recent research from the B2B Institute in collaboration with the Ehrenberg Bass Institute says that 95% of B2B buyers are not in market right now. The sales cycle of many of our products is relatively long. So if we're talking only about short-term messaging, we're only really talking to the other 5%. So we're spending a lot of our time talking to a small portion of the market. We're only spending 8%, and these numbers are general, of course. They're designed more as a heuristic than a specific number for your individual categories, but only 8% of our marketing budgets focus on long-term objectives. So if you flip those numbers around, we're spending 92% of our budgets talking to 5% of the audience, and we're spending the other 8% of our budgets talking to 95% of the audience, because we're obsessed with talking to people who are ready to go now. Talking to the entire audience requires us to take a slightly different view about what our message and what our marketing will look like. Why is it important, particularly for many of you as technology brands? Is that most of our companies are valued on their ability to generate revenue into the future, not what their revenue is right now. And as John Lombardo from the B2B Institute says, the stock price is based on future cash flows, not current cash flows. The concept of the 95-5 rule is powerful in two ways. One, it's a better focus on your external customer, who you should be talking to, who your market actually is. But B, there's some internal benefits there as well. If we think about the long-term growth of our brands and our companies, we need to be thinking about that other 95% of our market who aren't ready to buy right now. We need to be talking to them. It's securing the future growth of our brands, talking to them. Now, the way that this works, and the Aaron Bass Institute are, I guess, leaders in understanding and researching this particular concept, is that to grow a brand, we need to advertise to people who aren't in the market now. That's the fundamental principle of that 95-5 rule. So then when they do enter the market, our brand is one that they're familiar with, and they connect our brand with that purchase reason and occasion. If we do that across enough of that audience, enough of that 95, our short-term sales will then, in the longer term, show those results, and our brand share will grow. If we're only talking to the 5, we're going to be very limited in how we can grow our brand share because we're talking to such a small portion of the market. The other reason I advocate for a consumer mindset in B2B markets is research done on that same pool of award submissions has shown that the more committed B2B brands are to creativity in their marketing, the more effective those campaigns are. Typically, and I say typically, it's not always the case, but highly informative, highly educational, highly rational messaging lacks a little bit in creativity. We get into really interesting creative territories when we are talking more about the emotional side of what we're doing. And this particular chart highlights that as the creative commitment score, as our commitment to creativity increases, so does our effectiveness score. Effectiveness being a proxy for the business effects we're trying to impact. Profit, sales, leads, subscribers, whatever that may be. The more creative we are, the more effective our campaigns are at driving a result. So what should we be doing? I'm going to touch on a few key things here. I want to make sure I can get through this in the next sort of 5 or 10 minutes. Again, I'm talking generally here about B2B marketing. You will all have individual brands and contexts that this will differ within in some capacity. But firstly, we need to be focusing on building mental availability. Mental availability is the concept that the Aaron Bass Institute have come up with, and really what that is the propensity of a brand to come to mind in buying situations. It's a very, very fundamental concept of how we can grow our brands long term. It requires us to think less about ourselves and our brands and more about our customers and how they engage with and purchase from our category. Now, they've pulled this table together which talks about a brand-centric framing when we put our brands at the center of our marketing versus a customer-centric framing where we put out the way our customers engage with us at the center of our marketing. And fundamentally, there's some key shifts here. Moving from what do customers think of my brand to when do customers think of my brand? What are the entry points into our category? What are the reasons and occasions people purchase my product or service that we're offering? If we focus on that, more than that, we're moving into the customer's life cycle and mindset away from our brand being at the center of our marketing. Ads generate demand. Moving to needs generate demand. Now, this is potentially controversial in the sense that we'd all love to think that our ads can push people through funnels and into different flywheels and all these other things. Mostly, people's needs generate the demand for our products and services. They have a fundamental need. Our ads or our marketing exploits that need and pushes them towards us. And then secondly here, this is what I'm touched on. I define my competitor set but based on target demographics and product attributes. Moving from that to a mindset around category entry points being the reasons or occasions that people purchase my product or service. They shape retrieval and define what brands we compete with at each choice context. So there's a different mindset here from my brand is at the center and I'm trying to push people through my funnel into how do my customers engage with my category and where do I need to be connecting my brand with specific purchase reasons and occasions. The other thing we should be doing is really trying to balance our marketing investment across brand, building brand activity, building that emotional connection between our market and our brand, and sales activation activity. All of those tactics that generate the sales in the short term are vitally important. I'm certainly not here to tell you that those aren't necessary. They just need to be balanced with some longer term emotional brand priming. These two things work together, not against each other. Priming our buyers with brand ads in the longer term greatly increases the effectiveness of our sales activity in the short term. A customer who comes into your category with a pre-existing familiarity with your brand is far more likely to engage with one of your short-term pieces of sales activation than one who doesn't. Consistency. Spread your spend across time and across channels if possible. Now, this is one that does have a lot of specific category nuance. Many of your companies might have, say, calendar year events that drive a big entry point, whether it be financial year or holiday periods or other things like that. There would be an argument there that you might not necessarily want to spread your spend evenly across a 12-month period if that were the case. But where possible, try and be consistent. Try and have a brand layer of comms that's always talking to your market, and try and spread that across as many channels that your market engage with. And this is a big one, I think. Measure the effectiveness of your marketing over the long term, not the short. If we're talking to our customers, if we're talking to the other 95% that I mentioned, we're not going to generate a whole heap of sales activity tomorrow or next week. That's going to pay back in the long term. If we only measure the effectiveness of our marketing in the short term, we only then want to do short-term activity because that's what generates a short-term return. But we're then limiting our long-term growth. Try and spread your horizon in terms of measuring that effectiveness. 12 months plus. Look at how your spend last year is impacting your sales activity this year. It's a slightly more complex way of measuring it, but if we don't do it, we're missing a fairly big piece of the puzzle. And try and use some emotion. Our audiences are more similar to consumers than we think. We can harness emotion in our creative to try and forge those connections between our brands and the purchase occasions and reasons. That's the main thing we're trying to do. Connect our brand with what drives people into our category. If that happens, then when they enter that point, the pre-existing connection's there, the memory structure is there, and our sales activity just feeds off that. Be distinctive and build familiarity. So this talks directly to what some of the things Kate talked about actually, in terms of the brain's ability to connect certain sounds to something very quickly. And that's exactly how certain tones, she mentioned the HBO tone at the start of a show on HBO, certain jingles, that's how these things work. They have no real inherent value, but they become very quick identifiers for what the ad or what the company that you're engaging with actually is. Remember, most of our ads get completely forgotten within 24 hours. Completely forgotten by those who saw them. If we're not being distinctive and familiar, all of that spend is going down the drain. So we need to connect our message with our brand well. And some of the ways we can do that are through things like sound, through things like obviously our imagery, our logos, and our color tones and palettes. Our tone of voice can be that. We need to make sure we're being very memorable for being us. Use those distinctive assets that you have. Firstly, understand what you have as part of your brand that is distinctive, and utilize that as much as possible. Do not do your competitor's job for them. Do not market your category. Try and market your brand. And one of the final thoughts that I'll leave you with is a quote here from Jenny Romani from the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. Most of what we're doing at the moment is arguing as if we're already in the room. We're trying to persuade people to buy us now, to purchase our product or service, to sign up. It's assuming that we're already in that discussion set. What we should be looking at is getting into the room in the first place, talking to our audience about our brands, connecting our brands with those category entry points. And then when they come into the room, we're much more likely to be in there with them. So that'd be the final thought I'll leave you with is have a look at how you're talking to your audience. Are we arguing our case already? Or are we trying to get ourselves in the room so we can even start that argument? Thank you.